Number 9. Teen tragedy. Nobody knows exactly why 18-year-old Cameron Dunn went after Delano Samuels with a knife in the middle of public one day in 2019. Samuels was minding his own business in the English town of Smethwick when Dunn approached and stabbed him with a Rambo knife. The victim ran into a nearby sandwich shop for refuge, but Dunn followed him inside and continued the seemingly unprovoked attack, which was captured on surveillance footage. Dunn fled the scene on a bicycle, while the gravely injured victim managed to get into a car and drive away. Samuels was later found in the street next to the vehicle, which appeared to have crashed. The tip of the knife used in the attack was embedded in his head. He died from his injuries, and Dunn was taken into custody on suspicion of murder. The defendant denied the charge, but he was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 20 years. In a statement, Samuel's loved ones described the excruciating heartbreak they suffered after losing their beloved family member. They've made it their mission to speak out against knife violence, which they described as a pandemic that's senselessly claiming lives and robbing young people of their future throughout the United Kingdom. Number 8. Sister sacks younger sibling. What started out as a typical disagreement between siblings devolved into physical blows one day in 2022 when 19-year-old Makala Mott allegedly beat up her little sister in their Manitowoc, Wisconsin home. According to the victim, Makala entered her room and asked her about a sweatshirt she had borrowed. Makala became enraged during the conversation and allegedly punched her younger sibling at least 10 times in the face, leaving her with what a police report described as significant injuries. Authorities charged Makala with 1 count of physical child abuse. During questioning, she reportedly told officers that she had just lost it on her sister. The judge set the young woman's bail at $1,000, along with a required agreement to have no assaultive contact with the victim. Number 7. Deadly dad and daughter dispute. During the early morning hours one day in 2023, a resident of Brooklyn's Bensonhurst neighborhood heard their neighbor, 61-year-old Carl Secondino, screaming for help. When she opened her door, she saw blood splattered in the hallway and could hear a struggle going on inside. Officers found Carl dead and his 19-year-old daughter, Liana, clinging to life. She was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Carl's other daughter, 22-year-old Nikki, claimed that a pair of home intruders had broken in and attacked the family. The NYPD launched a manhunt, only to call it off amid suspicions that Nikki was lying. There were no signs of forced entry into the home, and a window was broken from inside, and Nikki allegedly had cuts on her hand that were consistent with a knife slipping in someone's hand during the stabbing. A neighbor told the New York Daily News that Carl and Nikki had a volatile relationship and could often be heard fighting. Carl's co-worker said that the frustrated father often complained about Nikki fighting all the time and how she has problems. A local exterminator claimed the fight sometimes got physical to the point of causing black eyes. Despite these issues, sources say Carl tried to do what was best for Nikki. He supported her unconditionally and funded her gender transition from male to female. But the two just couldn't get along, and shortly before the stabbing, Carl told Nikki she had 30 days to move out. The family also reportedly planned to pursue a restraining order against her. Nikki allegedly confessed to the crime during further questioning and admitted she wanted the victims dead. She was charged with murder, attempted murder, and criminal possession of a weapon. If convicted, she could face 50 years to life in prison. Number 6. Warring families reach boiling point. A long-running conflict between two families in Central California erupted into deadly violence in early 2023, leaving 6 people dead. And while the parties had ties to rival gangs, the origins of their hatred for each other were much more personal. The feud began years earlier when Martin Perez shot up the home of an elderly member of the Anala family. From then on, the Perez and Anala families frequently exchanged words and gunfire on occasion, but nothing that happened between them came close to being as violent as the most recent shooting, which happened 4 days after the elderly woman's home was shot at for a second time. On the day of the massacre, 35-year-old Angel Nanu Uriarte, whose loyalties lie with the Analas, and 25-year-old Noah Beard allegedly snuck onto the Perraz's property and opened fire on the family. The pair are accused of mercilessly shooting anyone within their sight, including a young woman who tried climbing over a fence in an attempt to flee the property. Another victim had just moved back into the home 3 days earlier after being released from foster care and reunited with his mother, who was also murdered in the shooting. Uriarte shot at the police when they attempted to apprehend him. They returned fire and the suspect was injured but survived. Authorities charged Uriarte and Beard each with 6 counts of murder, and they're being held without bail while their cases proceed. Number 5. Homeowner inherits code violations. In 2006, foreign currency trader Joseph Riccardi bought $1 million penthouse condo in a building along the Staten Island shoreline called the Ocean View Tower. He was unaware that the previous owner had expanded the penthouse and used certain parts of the rooftop in doing so, which violates the Big Apple's building code. Under the condo board's bylaws, Riccardi was responsible for getting his residence up to code, even though the renovation wasn't performed under his ownership. In 2016, the Ocean View Tower sued him for failing to remedy the issue. When a case went to trial 4 years later, Riccardi proposed a plan for modifying the property to make it legal, but he lost the case, and in addition to the more than $425,000 he had already spent on legal fees and penalties, he was ordered to pay $126,000 in damages and other costs. The judge gave him the option to tear down the extension and restore the condo to its original state. And at some point, the suggestion became a court order. But it would cost an estimated $300,000 to $500,000 to remove the addition, money that Riccardi claimed he didn't have. His financial situation worsened after he lost his job during the pandemic, and his ongoing legal issues have prevented him from starting a new job. When he tried to scrape together the money to get the job done, he couldn't find a contractor willing to do it because of the reputation the case has attached to the property. Riccardi's lawyer, Jorge Salva, has accused the condo board of having a vendetta against his client. For now, the homeowner is stuck in limbo as he appeals the seemingly never-ending case. He hit a new low in 2022 when the judge sent him to Rikers Island for allegedly refusing to comply with the orders to tear the addition down. Since then, he has been sent back to jail at least once for the same reason. Number 4. Dream home, nightmare neighbor. In 2016, Australian musician Guy Sebastian and his wife Jules built their dream home in a Sydney beachside suburb called Maroubra. But not everyone was thrilled to welcome the couple to the neighborhood, and issues quickly arose between Sebastian and his next-door neighbor, Philip Richard Hanslow. The house was still under construction in 2019 when the singer described Hanslow as one of those guys who sits out front and glares at everyone during an interview with radio station Hit 105. Sebastian said he was frustrated because Hanslow had gone to the press calling him a nightmare neighbor and painting himself out as a little guy who was being taken advantage of and encroached upon. But Hanslow wasn't exactly poor, according to the singer, who said that the man lived in a $2 million house. In Sebastian's own words, he's not the little guy, he's the angry guy. The pop star accused Hanslow of purposely parking so close to his construction equipment that he couldn't use any of it, despite owning 2 driveways with plenty of room to park in. Work on the house ground to a halt. By then, the neighbors had already been in a few explosive blowouts, and Sebastian avoided interaction with Hanslow at all costs. But in this case, he felt he had no other choice than to confront the insufferable neighbor. Feeling utterly defeated before even moving into the home, Sebastian pleaded with Hanslow to let bygones be bygones. After all, he said, they had to live next door to each other. He asked Hanslow what he needed to do to help make the situation more peaceful. But the war is still going on now, 7 years after it first started, and there's no end to it in sight. The most recent incident between the two men made headlines in early 2023 when Hanslow allegedly confronted Sebastian in his yard and threatened to kill him. Police were called to the scene, and Hanslow was charged with stalking and damaging property. Number 3. Fatal falling out. 20-year-old Daquan Trantham was shot in broad daylight in 2022 at a public playground in Brooklyn's Bedford-Stuyvesant neighborhood. It was a warm summer day, and the park was filled with families when the violence broke out. Upon hearing the first gunshot, terrified park visitors immediately fled with their children in tow. Trantham was rushed to the hospital with bullet wounds to his face and chest. Doctors were unable to save the FedEx worker, whose life was just getting started when it was abruptly cut short. An investigation found that both Trantham and the suspect, 19-year-old Dinique Grant, had ties to a street gang called the Drench Gang. Grant was accused of committing the shooting as an act of revenge for being shot a year earlier. After the previous shooting, there was a lot of what police described as internal squabbling among the gang, which grew more heated over time and ultimately led to the deadly violence. Grant faces murder and gun possession charges. Number 2. Brothers battle for billionaire father's estate. Real estate investor Mehmet Salah Tagliki grew up poor during the 1960s and went on to become one of Turkey's wealthiest businessmen, amassing a multi-billion-dollar fortune throughout his lifetime. After he died in 2009, his two sons, Mehmet from his first marriage and Ur from his second marriage, became entangled in a heated years-long court battle over their father's $4 billion estate. It was a complicated battle. Tagliki left behind homes, business properties, land, bank accounts, and other assets in both the US and Turkey. In addition to the feud over the late tycoon's estate, Mehmet accused Ur of trying to destroy his reputation by writing false things about him online and falsely portraying him as a terrorist. The defamation case went to trial in Palm Beach County, Florida in 2019 and ended with a verdict in Mehmet's favor. He was awarded a $740 million judgment, one of the largest in the state's history. But Ur was quick to challenge the decision, claiming that he was never served with lawsuit papers and didn't get a chance to present his side of the story in court. Ready to play hardball, Ur hired a team of attorneys who argued that their client had no involvement in the online slander that Mehmet had accused him of. They also challenged the Palm Beach County Court's authority over Ur, who wasn't even doing business in Florida at the time. Mehmet's lawyers, on the other hand, claimed that Ur simply ignored the lawsuit. The judge upheld the ruling in Mehmet's favor, except now Ur had to pay interest on the original balance, bringing the grand total to $894,468,833. The next step will be to target Ur's assets in an attempt to collect on the judgment, which is a whole separate headache. Mehmet's attorney, Jack Scarola, said that his client had repeatedly tried to bring the family back together. Sadly, their broken relationship turned out to be just another example of how money has a tendency to tear families apart, especially when it comes to inheritances. Number 1. An embarrassing display. A seemingly endless war between next-door neighbors in Schenectady, New York, became so out of hand in 2022 that nearby residents contacted the local news and asked for help bringing attention to the problem. Investigative reporters with CBS 6 learned that the decade-long dispute started with a disagreement over property lines and soon escalated into fights over bird feeders, things being thrown into each other's yards, and other hostile behavior. One of the parties built a large and extremely tall fence made out of tarps, presumably to block the two households from having to look at each other. Soon after the tarp structure appeared, the other neighbor placed a sign in their lawn that said, "Worst neighbor ever," and had an arrow pointing toward their adversary's house. In addition to the bright blue tarps being an eyesore, residents became fearful that the war would continue to escalate. After CBS 6 published a story on the feud, city authorities announced that the tarps would be taken down and thanked the news outlet for bringing the matter to their attention. Building inspector Chris Lunn was tasked with mediating the situation and making sure the residents comply with the city's orders. He could have issued a fine to the neighbor who hung the tarps, but instead, he offered to help build a fence that fit the homeowner's needs and complied with the city code. Lunn said he couldn't do much about the worst neighbor ever sign since it didn't violate any code enforcement policies, but he hoped the resident who put it there would take it down on their own accord. By helping to finally get the rivalry under control, Lunn made the entire neighborhood feel safer, happier, and relieved. He's become somewhat of a local hero among residents who are grateful for his intervention. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be co-workers with the person that your ex cheated on you with, or live next door to someone who outright refuses to get along, no matter how nice and respectful you try to be? Let us know in the comments below and hit that subscribe button. See you soon. Bye.